And then bam, out of nowhere, Michael Penix Jr. out of the University of Washington, drafted by the Falcons. Now, for Penix himself, let's start briefly with him, and then let's look at the big picture for the Atlanta Falcons and why they made this selection. I've been on this kid since Washington a year ago. And coming into the season, I'd heard, okay, hey, this kid out of Washington could be like a first-round level talent. I'm like, okay, my ears perk up. I'm going to be watching last year. I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to be watching a lot of Pac-12 football this season because A, it's the last year of the Pac-12. B, going to be watching a lot of Caleb Williams, Deion Sanders, Colorado, obviously in the Pac-12 last year. So let's see what this kid, and I think Kalen DeBoer is an awesome head coach. Now he's at Alabama, unfortunately, for my Vols. But let's see what this kid's got in Michael Penix Jr. And I watched about 2 games last year, middle of the season. There was one game against Oregon when he actually played Bo Nix. He ended up beating Oregon in the Pac-12 title game, the last Pac-12 title game. That one really stuck out to me. And I'm watching, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm sold. I'm sold. You're talking about a kid who has a monster arm, who's accurate with his big arm, who's great inside the pocket, is a good decision maker, doesn't turn the ball over, good footwork, throws a beautiful ball, throws a very catchable football, especially, again, he is a lefty, so that ball's going to land a little differently in a wide receiver's hands. Those little things do matter in the National Football League. We're looking at sort of the nuts and bolts of who you are mechanically as a quarterback. Penix has those things down. And the concerns for Penix regarding his speed, he put up a pretty good performance at the combine, and at his pro day, looked pretty fast to me. I think he ran like a 4.5 at his pro day. So speed's not an issue for Penix. Like he had the injury history at Indiana, so we understand that came into the equation as it pertains to how he was evaluated, and the skepticism around Michael Penix Jr. I get that. And well, he's getting older. He had to transfer. Well, so did Joe Burrow. And I know now Burrow's had an injury history in the NFL, but that's in large part due to the fact that his offensive lines in Cincinnati have been, by and large, pretty bad. But why did the Falcons take Michael Penix Jr.? Because that has been the pick that's led, again, it's leading this show, but it's led every show today. Why did the Falcons take a quarterback when they just signed an established quarterback in Kirk Cousins to 4 years, $160 million, $100 million guaranteed? I'll tell you exactly why. This is, I would argue, a greater example in the sense that this was not only a first-round pick, this is the 8th overall pick in the draft. This is the top quarter of the first round of the draft. This, to me, feels a lot like the Seahawks 12 years ago. Can't believe it's been that long. They signed Matt Flynn, 3-year deal, a lot of money, but third round, they take this kid, who, by the way, is not as physically gifted as Penix, just from a size standpoint, in Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson had been at NC State, then he transferred to Wisconsin, 3rd round pick. There were some scouts that liked him at that point. Hey, this kid could be pretty good. Russell comes into camp. Again, they've already committed all this money to Matt Flynn. And Pete Carroll, Pete Carroll's in a situation. The Seahawks were coming off back-to-back 7-9 seasons. Sounds familiar, Atlanta? Back-to-back, now again, new coach, but still, back-to-back 7-9 seasons. And he watches camp, watches the preseason, and he's like, you know what? Russell's better than Matt Flynn. We're going to roll with Russell Wilson, and that obviously worked out. Obviously, the end wasn't great, but listen, to be honest, Seahawks fans, he got you to 2 Super Bowls. Even his rookie year, he was really good that season as well. Won a playoff game. That, to me, feels like exactly what this is. I'm not necessarily saying that Michael Penix is going to beat Kirk Cousins out this offseason. I'm also not saying he's not going to beat Kirk Cousins out this season, because of the simple fact that Kirk Cousins is still rehabbing an Achilles injury. Now, the good news about that is, and we learned this, the first example I can remember is Cam Akers. Cam Akers was a running back for the Rams when they won the Super Bowl a few years ago, but very early on in training camp, late July 2021, he tore his Achilles. And we're like, oh man, they just lost their starting back for the year. This sucks for the Rams. He's back for the playoffs. And a lot of that is this new sort of surgery that I forget the surgeon's name. I wish I could give him credit, but that they've developed to where you can come back quicker and just as good as you previously were with an Achilles injury. We'll see if that's the case with Aaron Rodgers next season with the Jets. Obviously, I'll briefly touch on the Jets. I thought they made a great selection in the first round. Kirk Cousins could be a similar situation. He is younger than Rodgers and not quite the injury history. But here's the thing about Kirk Cousins. And here's the thing that I am perplexed about. Well, Michael Penix Jr., why do you take him and develop into this because there's been some similarities or some comparisons. Hey, Jordan Love sat 3 years under Aaron Rodgers. Well, the difference is Jordan Love was like 21 years old, 22 years old when he was sitting behind Aaron. Michael Penix Jr. is 24. So if he sits 3 years, he'll be darn near 30. Well, I think that's logically flawed, because if Michael Penix Jr. is, he's so old, Kirk Cousins is 36 years old off an Achilles. And we all thought, I liked the Kirk Cousins deal. Listen, I had no inkling they were going to take a quarterback in the first round. But even at the time, it was, okay, listen, Kirk Cousins is way better than Desmond Ridder or Taylor Heineke or anybody the Falcons tried to throw out a year ago. But at the same time, okay, that's going to take him to 40. And as we all know, unless your name is Tom Brady and briefly Drew Brees, you don't play elite football at 40 years old at the quarterback position. Really any position outside of Adam Vinatieri and some other kickers back in the past. Morton Anderson. But Tom Brady, I used to call him the great outlier. Like, do not compare your old quarterback to Tom Brady. This just isn't normal. Kirk, by the time he gets to year 3 of that contract, he'll be 30. I guess at that point, he'll be 38, going on 39. Then you start to ask some questions. And the question for the Atlanta Falcon is, and this is why I defend their front office for making this pick, because there's the video going viral of their GM talking to the owner, Arthur Blank, and Arthur Blank is like, what are we doing? Like, Arthur Blank doesn't look thrilled about the pick, and the GM's kind of explaining this to him, and the video kind of goes viral, as did his press conference with the head coach of the Falcons, Raheem Morris. They're looking at an upside pick on this. And also, to a certain degree, the overall production that Michael Penix Jr. showed us at Washington, with NFL-ready receivers like Rome Odunze, with, some great offensive linemen around him as well, we can be able to translate that to the Falcons. And we can also be able to translate that to a division that ain't great. The Saints are still not as much as they were, but kind of in salary cap hell. The Panthers are basically in hell as far as their roster is constructed. And Tampa Bay's viable. We saw them get to the playoffs a year ago. Baker Mayfield earned every penny of that contract he got. But listen, Tampa Bay, we understand that there's some limitations of the roster. They haven't been a great drafting team deep into drafts, as we've seen the last few years. That's part of the reason that Tom Brady left. Part of it's because they were drafting late in the first round every year, so that factors in as well. But that's a very winnable division for the Atlanta Falcons. But at that point, if you're Atlanta, and let's say Kirk, the injury, or just the fact that he's an older pocket quarterback at 36 years old, maybe doesn't pan out into what you thought you'd be, you have Michael Penix Jr. Now you're set. Now you have a young quarterback, certainly not relative to rookies, but relative to what you have now in Kirk Cousins. And I'm here, Kirk's guaranteed $100 million. So if Michael Penix Jr. becomes a starter, you're not, I think I have a $40 million cap hit if you were to move on from Kirk. And so you won't have the benefit of having a young, we always say young quarterbacks, rookie contract quarterbacks. That's when you attack your window. That's when you go out and get free agents. The Falcons won't necessarily be able to do that because of Kirk Cousins' cap hit. Yeah, but all of Atlanta's stars are on the rookie deals. So by the time Penix's contract comes close to expiring or gets to a point year 3, if he's good enough, where they can extend him, that's around the time where you look at Bijan Robinson's contract, at Drake London's contract. Kyle Pitts will be beyond that point, but still, you consider him as well. Keep in mind, the Falcons had a pretty good defense last year. Keep in mind that they kept a lot of games close. It was their offense that failed them, in particular the quarterback, Desmond Ridder or Taylor Heineke, who failed them in the end. So again, if this is the guy that Atlanta has looked at all along, if this is a situation where the Falcons woke up Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, yesterday, draft day, and thought, you know what? We've always been, the history of the Falcons is they've always been mediocre to pretty good. They have a couple in I think 60 years of the existence of the franchise, almost 60 years. They have a couple Super Bowl appearances, one in which they got not blown out, but handled by the Denver Broncos in John Elway's final game, and the second one infamously blew a 28-3 lead to the New England Patriots. But outside of that, it's they're fine. I mean, the Falcons rarely are awful. They're not like where Carolina is, but you never look at the Falcons as, that's a premium franchise. They're the Steelers or the Packers or the 49ers or the Chiefs. You don't look at them in that context. We never have. And I think you look at that front office and you say, if you are the front office and you look at the franchise, you look at the overall roster, say, okay, I like our young pieces. I like what we have on defense. By the way, we can address the defense as the draft goes on and say, what are we aiming to be? NFC South champions or NFC champions? And eventually Super Bowl champions, which the Falcons, of course, have never won a Super Bowl. We feel like Michael Penix Jr. can get us there. We feel like we are willing to, again, listen, things change. And, it's like, well, I've heard the pushback. Well, if you gave Kirk Cousins all that money, why'd you draft Michael Penix? They didn't necessarily know. You have to go through the draft process. You got to interview guys. You got to work out with guys. Like the Denver Broncos, I don't totally agree with their pick of Bo Nix. They had to get a quarterback at some point, so I guess he was the best left. But reportedly, Sean Payton was blown away by Bo Nix. Well, if you really like that guy, then take him. There's nothing wrong with drafting a quarterback, especially when your guy is getting up there in age, as is Kirk Cousins, when you have the young, very talented pieces, which they do. So I defend this pick. A matter of fact, I think the Falcons got absolutely, unequivocally the second best quarterback in this draft to Caleb Williams. He throws the prettiest ball, arguably, in this draft, even over Caleb. He's great in the pocket. He's a good decision maker, good leadership qualities. Like, we see Oregon had an excellent defense last year, torched them twice. Well, he didn't play well against Michigan. Who did? Who did play well against Michigan? Ohio State probably came, well, and Alabama, but that was more because of Bama's defense and some special teams mistakes by Michigan. That was the best team in college football season long. That's why I think J.J. McCarthy, slightly overdrafted. But I defend this pick for Atlanta. I think they made the right decision, the right selection, and ultimately they were looking towards the future. When you go through the draft evaluation process, sometimes you got to be thinking, you do have to change your plan. I have a saying on the show that I can have an opinion on something, but if I'm presenting new data, new information, it's at that point, it's just stubborn not to move off your opinion. And I think that's what the Falcons did right there. And I think it's a smart move by the front office and a long-term way of thinking, very similar to that, to a lesser degree, of what the Seattle Seahawks did in 2012. Signed Matt Flynn, drafted Russell Wilson in the third round. Russell ended up being better. And by the way, last thing, if Kirk Cousins is still rehabbing, still not 100%, and Michael Penix Jr. is getting reps with the first team and blows everybody away, and at that point, oh, you wasted $100 million on Kirk Cousins. Pretty good problem to have. If your problem is our first-round quarterback is amazing and our backup is very productive but a little expensive, there are worse situations to be in the NFL than what the Atlanta Falcons will be in, should that be the case. But my guess is Kirk Cousins starts this year, starts from start to finish. Falcons probably make the playoffs, and then they roll with Penix in 2025. That's my guess. But maybe Penix blows them away. Wouldn't shock me. He's blown me away. We'll see if he is able to do the same in training camp with the Atlanta Falcons. But totally agree with this pick, 100%. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.